So there's a belief out there that says basically we create our own reality in the relationships that we're in based on our core belief system and the energy that we're putting out. Today we're going to look at whether or not that's actually true, especially in the dynamic of an emotionally destructive relationship. I'm Ketra Thompson, and I'm a certified master hypnotist. Thank you so much for joining me as we get to the heart of this controversial issue. Now, before we get started, I do want to remind you to hit subscribe and hit that bell notification so that you can be notified every time I post a new video. So what is this belief anyway? Basically, this belief has been created because of the thought that we manifest whatever comes into our life based on the energy that we're putting out there. This can really leave a victim stuck in an emotionally abusive relationship feeling super confused because they didn't think this is what they wanted or asked for at all. So there's a few things going on. First of all, we co-create our relationship and the dynamics inside of it. And it's based on our core belief system and what we truly believe we deserve or what was modeled for us in childhood. But there's also some other things that go along with this. So first, let's take a look at how these belief systems are even formed in the first place. Now, our subconscious mind is not a part of our operating system when we're first born. That's our unconscious mind. That's the part of us that tells our blood to pump, our heart to pump, our lungs to breathe air. But our subconscious mind is still being formed. And so from the time of birth until about the age 7, between 7 and 8, we are creating a belief system that will run like the blueprint for our whole life in our subconscious mind. And our subconscious mind controls, most say, over 95% of everything we think, everything we feel, and everything we do. Which means we're taking in information when we're very, very young and we don't have any level of discernment, and we're creating meaning for the words that people say to us, the interactions we watch going on around us, things we might even see on TV. We're creating meaning, and then we're using that information to write that blueprint in our subconscious mind, which is going to be the playbook for our life. So when someone ends up in a relationship like this, it's very likely that they chose a relationship that felt somehow emotionally familiar to them based on the experiences that they went through as a child. They're not really consciously aware of it, but there's something that feels familiar, or they have some kind of deep inner belief that they don't deserve something better. But this isn't the only thing at play in an emotionally destructive relationship. And this is why this answer isn't super simple. In an emotionally destructive relationship, the dynamics are actually quite different. And what happens is that oftentimes a trauma bond gets created. This trauma bond makes it much harder for the victim to see and think clearly and make a decision from a place of clarity. So the cycle that tends to happen in emotionally destructive relationships starts off with love bombing. So this person is showering the other person with lots of love, lots of attention, lots of affection, always wanting to be together, saying all the right things. And so it's normal to believe that maybe you've just found this wonderful person and that this is what you've been waiting for all your life. But what happens is once there's a commitment, that love bombing stops. And now there's distance making that happens, because someone who is emotionally destructive doesn't like to be vulnerable and connected deeply. They want to stay on a surface level. They aren't really in touch with their own feelings. They haven't been introspective. They don't understand empathy. And so the risk of them having to be vulnerable in an intimate relationship is high. So they create enough distance to push that person back without pushing them enough to make them go away completely, usually. And then when they do something that makes them upset enough and an argument ensues, or they're picking fights and they realize that they might actually be at risk of pushing too far, they pull the person back in. And then they start sort of a form of that love bombing again. They profess their love, they make apologies, and they create closeness. And this cycle goes round and round, where they are pulling someone in and pushing them away and pulling them in, pushing them away, way. And so it creates confusion in the victim's mind about who they're actually with. Who's the real person? What's the true version of this person? What is reality? What the cycle is really creating is cognitive dissonance in the mind of the victim, where they cannot come to a conclusion of clarity. So what is cognitive dissonance? It's actually a pattern of inconsistent thoughts and beliefs, usually accompanied by a difficulty making decisions, because there's information that's very conflicting, and the person who's being victimized would happily give the benefit of the doubt. But there's so much conflicting information based on the behavior of the emotionally abusive person, they just can't figure out what's true. This person says they love them, then they act like they don't, and sometimes they act like they do, and then they really act like they don't, and it just creates mental chaos. This happens because there's just so much inconsistency in the behavior of the emotionally destructive partner, and the other one just can't make sense of it. So you take a scenario like that, and then you add in the deep human desire for attachment. Every single human has a need for deep attachments. We're born with it. We can't help it. We have attachment bonds. And then you add to it the things that probably contributed to belief systems in childhood, and you can see why this isn't a clear answer. Part of this process includes the devaluation stage. Now, when you hear that term, a lot of people think of when they get dumped, but it isn't necessarily the case when you're dealing with an emotionally destructive spouse that doesn't want a divorce or separation or to break up. The devaluation is a little different. It's more about ignoring the other person, criticizing them, dismissing their thoughts, and really playing the victim so they don't ever have to take responsibility for their own bad behavior. This just adds to the cognitive dissonance. The victim is just having more self-doubt created when this cycle continues, especially when there's gaslighting involved, where they're denying your reality. Now you've got a lot of mental confusion going on. You can probably see by now that this is not a reflection of the relationship that they thought they were consciously choosing to go into. They were actually manipulated into believing that their partner was just over the moon in love with them, and they thought they'd found something truly wonderful. So what part is the victim actually playing in this whole co-creation relationship? The truth is, the part they're playing is very likely a subconscious belief system part of them that they're just not even aware of, because it's always been a part of how they think and feel and believe. And it was a system created in their mind when they were very, very young. And it likely has some running tapes that are going, saying things like, you're not worthy, you're unlovable, this is as good as it gets, you'll never be loved again. Things that they might not even be consciously aware of, but they're running in the background of their mind. If they haven't done the deep inner work of working out these belief systems that were planted in there so long ago, it makes it much harder for them to break free from this confusing dynamic. Especially if they were deprived of love as a child, or maybe even raised by a toxic parent. This can create more possibility that they will end up in a relationship just like this, or less aware that they're entering into a relationship like this. So the truth is that both points of view are partially accurate. They are co-creating their situation because of their own childhood programming and their own inability to recognize their deep sense of self-worth. And they were terribly manipulated into choosing someone who seemed wonderful and turned out to be a manipulator. I love the use of the word and the reason is because it is rarely all a black or white kind of answer, especially when it comes to how the mind works and the role that it plays in the background of our lives. Two things can be true at once, and two things can be true in percentages, a little bit true, and maybe the other part is much more true. And so it's important to look at these things from a holistic view, taking in all the contributing factors. So what can you do about it? This dynamic can absolutely emotionally destroy the one person and continue enabling the other person that has really toxic behavior patterns. You cannot continue to co-create a life with someone that is so off path for what you want, that's so unable to be introspective and empathetic. If those are the things you want in your life, it's going to require taking some action. The victimized partner must get the help to reframe their core beliefs and change themselves, their view of themselves, and heal those inner wounds from childhood so they can integrate them into themselves without living out these same repeating patterns. Doing this helps them get to a point where they can actually confidently hold boundaries with people in their lives, and it helps them regain their inner power and their strength. And this isn't about whether or not they stay or leave the person that is emotionally destructive to them. Hopefully they leave the situation, because ultimately that gives them the best chance. But this isn't about that, because they could end up in another relationship very similar to this, because this kind of behavior shows up in a lot of different ways, and you don't always recognize it from one person to the next until it's too late. And that's why doing the deep inner work is so important, whether you stay or leave. This is why I love hypnosis so much. Hypnosis allows you to access your subconscious mind, get to the root of the issue, reframe your core belief around this issue, and create the ability for you to have rapid changes in your life that finally last. This allows you to reframe your belief system so that you don't have to be led around by old damage and old belief systems that are holding you back, and instead you can live a life that feels empowered and you can make decisions from a place of clarity. Hypnotherapy is amazing because in just a matter of weeks, you can have already created all these lasting changes in your life, and sometimes this takes years in other settings. So it gives you the traction you want, and it gives it to you in a much quicker way. When you are ready to break free from this cycle and finally regain your confidence, schedule a consultation call with me. There's a link in the description below. I offer free consultations so that we can decide if this is the right fit for you, if we're a good fit to work together, and we can make a customized plan for you. You can regain your confidence, you can regain your mental clarity, and you can get back to feeling like yourself again. Remember, when you change yourself, you change the world. Be sure to check that out in the description, and until next time, curate a life by your own design.